Okay, as you can see on the board, I've put down 10 sporting scandals since 1989. These are the 10 biggest sports scandals since 1989 for their implications on sport. Now, there are some scandals I could have put on, but for me, these were the biggest for me. This is my subjective list of what I feel are the 10 biggest scandals. Although there are other ongoing scandals and some more regional scandals that also have similar implications to these big ones. The Nancy Kerrigan attack in '94 at the US Olympic trials for figure skating. There's been a film made about that now. Nancy Kerrigan, skater, one of her rivals in the US team paid her then husband and bodyguard to break her leg, basically. She then makes it to the Olympics and wins a medal in the Olympics, whereas her opponent wins sod all. That deserves its own video on its own. But because it was seen in especially a sport like figure skating, which seems very graceful, it highlighted a lot of issues within the US program, and it also made big news because it was just before an Olympic Games in Lillehammer, and it really dominated that Olympics. Was this ongoing the Nancy Kerrigan scandal? It dominated the press not only in the US but across Europe as well, because it was a European-based Olympics that and and winter sport is seen as more pure than summer Olympics. There seems to be less scandal in winter sport, although there, of course, we'll get to another Olympic scandal on the list later, as you can see at number 8. Number 9, and this has still got a bit of ongoing side to it, is the AFL NRL peptide scandal. I have done a video on it. Now, it's the only Australian scandal I've put on here, and it does have implications outside of Australia. It does. There's organised crime links here from Southeast Asia. The AFL team, Essendon, the Essendon Bombers, who play in the Aussie Rules AFL, they went on. They were one of the best teams in the AFL at the time, and they wanted to keep winning. And they had a new coach, and they brought in this sports scientist called Stephen Dank. He also did work at the Cronulla Sharks in the NRL, which led to the NRL having its own peptide scandal. But I've combined them as one. I think having two separate. It was one bigger scandal that had subplots to it. Stephen Dank had worked as a consultant at a number of AFL and NRL clubs, but he was brought in by Cronulla in the NRL for a brief stint with their coaching staff to improve the fitness and recovery levels of players at Cronulla, including some of the leadership core. And Paul Gallen, former Cronulla captain, yes, the year after, he wins the State of Origin Series in New South Wales, but he was implicated and got fined, and he gave evidence. The AFL one is a bigger; it's a whole team being doped, and that has had massive implications domestically in Australia, which has shocked Australian sports fans, a sports mad country to the core. But the NRL one has bigger implications because it is shown broadcast worldwide. There's a worldwide audience for the NRL. It's the top rugby league competition in the world. They obviously had the World Cup recently in Australia, but Australians are a sports mad country. It's part of their social culture and their fabric, and that really struck with the Australian public. It really broke Australian trust in their sport. And there are other sports scandals in Australia, but that is the big one for Australia. The Russian doping scandal going from Sochi onwards, state-sponsored doping, fiddling of samples, non-compliance, the IOC barring them from Olympic competition. Obviously, this comes at a time when Russia had won the World Cup, and there's allegations of Russian players, doping, and obviously the Sochi Winter Olympics, and the second Olympic scandal. There are many Olympic scandals I could put on here, but I've gone with the Russian doping scandal of 2014 to present day. That comes as no surprise. There is a lot of a political element to this one as well, to do with state sanctions against the Russian government, and there's a backdrop of sort of similar to the Cold War in the political sporting side of things. Football Leaks by Der Spiegel. That's highlighted a lot of issues within European football. Der Spiegel it wasn't just that there was going to be a breakaway European Super League that was planned. UEFA have panicked, and they're bringing in a new European Cup competition, which I don't think is actually going to help European clubs. There's also alleged interference in UEFA going to be interfering in domestic league and cup structures. But it does highlight a growing gulf between the people who own football clubs and the governing body and the fans, the people who pay their wages, basically. because there was secret clandestine meetings between some top level clubs. They're denying it. One club actually came out and admitted it, which then sort of throws the whole thing under a bus. Really, there are other leaks in here to do with corrupt payments, tax avoidance, and that's still ongoing. There's more stuff coming out with Der Spiegel. They are very, very good at undercover reporting. And football, there's a few football scandals on this list. I can't think she knows. And the Football Leaks one, I put at number 7 because it's a recent one, and I don't think the full implications of what Der Spiegel are unearthing to do with dodgy payments to third parties, the gulf between the clubs and the fans, and the amount of money that's sloshing around that some of it's not being paid in tax. There's all sorts more to come out with Der Spiegel leaking is what they've got. They've got a whole tranche of documents and they've only released a little bit. There's more to come out with the Football Leagues. The first cycling one of this is the Festina affair in '98 in the Tour de France, when the whole team was thrown out and automatically disbanded because they were systematically doping every single one of their riders without fail. Not just in the Tour de France, but in every event that Festina participated in. This comes out before Lance Armstrong. Notice the dates. The year before Lance Armstrong wins the Tour de France, I think Jan Ullrich won the Tour de France that year. He was later stripped of that title. The Festina affair really shook cycling fans. Cycling fans knew that, of course, there was the occasional bad apple, according to cycling fans, that were doping. But it raises questions about the great Eddie Merckx, for example. We do know with the Festina affair, other teams were doing it. They were the scapegoats. Other teams protested the next day, and it almost caused the Tour de France not to be completed. There was a mass protest at the start line the following day. The race organisers were in panic mode. There are criminal convictions, and it does deserve its own video. I think the Festina cycling affair, the doping scandal, it really shook confidence in the sport with fans. And Lance Armstrong, ironically, when he was cheating, helped rebuild that confidence with his story of defeating cancer, surviving terminal cancer or near terminal cancer, and battling back to win 7 consecutive Tour de France's. But the Festina scandal really damaged cycling, and I don't think cycling's fully recovered. I think Lance Armstrong has also damaged it, but cycling hasn't fully recovered. The Major League Baseball steroid scandal, there were several baseball. There's a betting scandal in there. There's a few other scandals with Major League Baseball. This is the big one that has caused the most damage for the Major League Baseball. It starts in the 80s before I was born, but it all comes to light in the 2000s. And then there's a commission in 2007, and it highlights that around 80% of players were on steroids in apparently the greatest era of baseball's ever seen, with home runs and everything like that. Apparently 80+% of players were juicing. And it was at its peak in the 90s. The occasional player was caught, but when the beans started getting spilled and the report was completed in 2007 and released to the public, it really shook baseball fans and sports fans across North America badly, really badly shook baseball fans. The fact that systematic and systemic doping was taking place for the better part of 30 years. And baseball, I don't think, has fully recovered. It had a massive knock-on effect because of the weak testing regime, the fact that players were openly doing it. Coaches were basically saying, you've got to bulk up, here's some supplements. It really damaged trust in baseball. And baseball hasn't fully recovered, in my view. A similar scandal, in the sense of breaking trust between fans and the sport, is the NBA betting scandal in 2008. I'm not going to go into the full details because I am actually planning to do a video on the NBA betting scandal, but it involved referees, fixing of matches, and organised crime. And there's still indictments going on, and there are documentaries, and there are all sorts about the NBA betting scandal. One particular referee was singled out as the scapegoat, but some of the evidence he has given to prosecutors could lead to more prosecutions. We haven't heard the end of the NBA betting scandal. It happened 10 years ago, 11 years ago when it came out. But it, again, much like the Major League Baseball steroid scandal and the Festina affair, really shook fans to the core. Baseball and basketball are two of the biggest sports in the US and Canada. The NBA betting scandal really shook basketball fans and wider sports fans really badly. And the NBA, has recovered somewhat, but there are still lingering undercurrents that team owners were involved in having favourable referee games, so their team could progress with the playoffs or get to the playoffs. And there's a whole host of other issues with the NBA and the betting scandal that was unearthed in 2008. It had been going on for a systematic period of time for about 14, 16 years. This one particular referee was involved, but he mentions that other referees also had a betting syndicate and that owners and the league would pressurise the referees to give certain decisions at certain points in games and favour refereeing to certain teams. So it's more than just betting on matches. There's a much darker undercurrent of match fixing there. The Lance Armstrong doping scandal, I think, took cycling back to the dark days of the Festina affair. He had helped rebuild the image somewhat. There were rumours he was doping, and he always shot them down. He even lied in federal court. Floyd Landis, who won the Tour de France in 2006, he made sure that the day after, because Floyd Landis refused to dope anymore, that he was doping for these period of time. Here's the evidence, and he made sure Floyd Landis got stripped of his title within a few years, within 6 years or so. He's also on the chopping block when he, out of the blue, sat down with Oprah Winfrey and decided to open up and spill the beans. For some reason, he went on the Oprah Winfrey show and decided to go, by the way, I cheated for 95% of my career from 95 onwards. So his great story of defeating cancer and battling back from near terminal testicular cancer to basically admitting I cheated the entire time, and I was an absolute arsehole to my teammates, and I was a bully, and there was corruption, and we made sure we paid off the testers, and a load of stuff came out. There is still more to come out with the Lance Armstrong doping scandal. He's banned from cycling for life. He's trying to become a triathlete. He's trying to have his ban overturned. He's been stripped of all his Tour de France titles. He hasn't necessarily covered himself in glory in the aftermath of after he admitted. But yeah, that's damaged cycling, I think, not irreparably, but very badly. I think worse than the Festina affair. The top two are football scandals, obviously. The Italian football betting scandal in 2006 was big because that year Italy won the World Cup. And it wasn't the first betting scandal in a major European league. We'd seen it before in Italy in the early 80s. But this one involved not just a few players and a few club presidents and a few officials. It involved referees, club owners, players, managers, club officials, fans were even involved, and organised crime. The mafia had a big involvement in this betting scandal, and players like Buffon were implicated. Former Italian captain, World Cup winner, Buffon was implicated. Some clubs have gone out of business because of this betting scandal, and Italian football has not fully recovered. The quality of football in the Serie A and the football league system in Italy is not as great now. Fans don't trust football as much. Attendances are down. TV revenues are down. The quality of player being produced is lesser. It's not attracting as big a star going to Italy to play. Serie A in the 90s was the best league in the world. It really was. It had a great TV deal, not only domestically but worldwide. It was more popular than the English Premier League, more popular than La Liga, more popular than the Bundesliga, Liga. It was the most popular league in Europe, if not the world. It's still in the top 5 leagues in Europe, but it's not as strong as it once was, and has never fully recovered. Never fully recovered. And of course, my number one is the FIFA corruption scandal, coming out about 6 months to just 6 to 9 months after the World Cup in Brazil. Someone went to the old investigative journalist, didn't they? And the corruption scandal at FIFA is still ongoing. There are still indictments being made against Sepp Blatter and his cronies. We've seen people go to prison already. We've seen US and Swiss federal investigators search FIFA's head office, search offices in the US and New York. The CONCACAF is the federation that the US is under. Their offices have been searched. Members of the US Federation have been charged, and it's an ongoing thing because we've seen UEFA now being caught up in it with Michel Platini with some undisclosed payments, and it summed up what a lot of football fans and a lot of club officials and national teams felt was going on. We sort of knew, but it confirmed, and the trust between the governing bodies. It's not just FIFA; it's the national governing bodies, the regional governing bodies, FIFA, the whole lot, and football fan in the street, the fan in the street, the your lower league player, because not only did it highlight issues, there's also match fixing scandals, betting, all sorts, and hence the Italian one. But it really summed up a failure of governance. The fact that the World Cup was going to Qatar, I think, was there's something dodgy going on here. There were allegations about World Cups dating from, I think, the Japan Korea World Cup, so 2002 onwards. I think every World Cup is implicated in the corruption scandal. There was a whole host of issues coming out. Football internationally hasn't fully recovered, and the trust is gone completely. And that is still an ongoing federal investigation. These are the top 10 scandals for me. There are some scandals. I could do individual scandals of Olympic doping in rugby league and Aussie rules. There's a host of them. Most is to do with salary caps. They're not actually as bad. The doping scandal with Russia takes us back to the 80s and the Cold War. The football leaks, the football scandals. There's a lot of them. I could do a whole list of the top 10 football scandals of all time. Cycling, there are more than just the Festina and Lance Armstrong doping scandals. There are more. Major League Baseball also has other scandals attached to it. Same with the NBA. The NBA doesn't just have the betting scandal. There are other issues with the NBA. But I felt these were the 10 biggest that I think have had the most profound effect on professional sport since 1989. There are so many scandals, though. I just picked the 10 that I felt, for me, in my lifetime, have been the biggest and most impactful on the sports that they're involved in, because that led to criminal convictions. That's led to criminal prosecutions. Prosecutions in that one, prosecutions in that one, prosecutions in that one, prosecutions in that. I think about 7 on the list have involved organised crime and criminal prosecutions. But there we go. There's the 10 biggest sports scandals since 1909. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place your comments below. And also, what's your top 10? I would love to hear what your top 10 scandals are, because there are so many. And I shall have some more videos for you soon.